It's our connection to immortality, that when we're preserving items from the past, we're preserving people from the past, and we're preserving objects into the future for people to understand in the future.
And it's really interesting just opening up one of those books and you know, seeing the names and, you know, sometimes even making connections, like this name has been around Dubuque for forever. And so it's kind of interesting to peer back into those books and know that you're kind of reaching back in history.
We as human beings are the creators of history, and things that we do in our everyday existence, we're constantly creating what I like to call the stuff of which history is made, and the stuff of which history is made constitutes the archives.
It's nice to have an archive for a community or for an institution to help preserve historical documents, many of them that can tell a story that is unique to a place's past. And without an archive to do that, a lot of that history could be lost.
That information that is just gone, is just gone.
You know, how can we know who we are if we don't know the past? If we don't know the past, we don't know the past.
For those who like to study history, archives provide ample opportunity to learn and grow. With their supply of original documents, they can be a researcher's best friend. But what are archives exactly?
I would say that an archives, in my understanding, is an outgrowth of the institution itself. It is a repository for the memory of that institution.
In general, a lot of what we do in the archive is collect pieces of information that are being kept not only for just posterity's sake, but also for public knowledge, to serve as a repository for knowledge and historical items.
That's part of what you're doing, as you preserve 3,000 letters of one family in the community. You're preserving and immortalizing those people.
We as human beings are the creators of history, and things that we do in our everyday existence, we're constantly creating what I like to call the stuff of which history is made, and the stuff of which history is made constitutes the archives. You can't do everything, but try to collect as much as you can, at least a good representation of the body of knowledge that people are producing every day in their own activities and their own lives.
Archives around the world are in trouble. With many problems limiting their resources, some archives have been forced to close their doors to the public. Archivists in the Dubuque area have also been facing problems and expressed their own concerns relating to the institutions.
Over the last probably 10 years or so at least, vendors going around to courthouses and city halls and archival institutions and things and saying, we will digitize all of this information for you, and then you can throw away all the originals and you'll save all this space, you know. Well, the problem there is that we've changed all the ways we store information. Well, not only do you face hardware issues with that, but you also can face software issues, because certain data being created with a version 2.5, suddenly now you're up to version 7.5 of the software, and it is not compatible with the earlier version of it. Digitization is a technique for access. It is not a technique for preservation, and that's the hardest thing to sell people on.
One of the challenges I'm facing right now is, capturing the information that is born digital. That's one of our biggest challenges right now, because we know that there is a great deal of good information that is being lost. Every time a hard drive crashes, You know, that information that might have been on that person's computer is just gone.
Yeah, one of the big problems we have here, that's a great question. We're in a historic home, and part of that is that nothing is airtight, nothing is watertight. And if water and air can get into a building, so can pests, such as mice or insects of various sorts. So that's always a constant challenge we have here specifically, because our archive is stored, located in a historic building, a historic home.
It'd be great if I didn't have any water pipes flowing above the documents. That's a cause of concern for me. If any of those pipes were to ever burst, I would have a real mess on my hands. Facilities, you know, that's also a continuing challenge. Having the space to store the things that we want to store, the conditions in which we want to store them in, that's always a challenge. Sometimes you just have to work with what you're given and make the most of what you have.
Obviously, I get asked this more increasingly all the time from people, what's going to happen to the center when you retire? And I guess that's totally up in the air. I don't have an answer for that. But I think it is a shame that we can't find a way to have someone that I could mentor who could carry on the work. Obviously, I think that's a major problem there, is that we really need to find a way to have someone down in the trenches that I can work with and mentor. The other thing being the overall center itself. I think in order for it to survive down the road, we're going to have to find an endowment and find some wherewithal, financial wherewithal, to keep the center going.
Well, I think for a lot of archives, this is true nationally and I'm sure internationally as well, is funding as the main problem. Materials that are needed to properly preserve items and artifacts are expensive, and people don't always necessarily see the value in doing that, and even if they do, there aren't always necessarily the funds available to do that properly and to pay for the staff as well as the materials necessary, and even the space alone has a cost associated with it.
The biggest problem you always have with preserving artifacts is maintaining the proper humidity and the proper temperature. And generally, if you're not in a basement or an attic in a building and it has relatively good ventilation, it should be within the normal range of standards for humidity and temperature.
But it would be nice to have, you know, a perfectly environmentally perfect environmental conditions for the archives. If I had, you know, like a air conditioning system that could keep the room at 68 degrees and a constant humidity of 45%, that would be great. That's just not the reality. That's not the world that we're living in.
The other thing that you find with small town or small county historical collections, they aren't correctly archived using the appropriate archival material. The people that take care of the collections tend to be old, and old people tend to die. And so before each person can complete their portion of the exercise, unfortunately they die. So a couple of the people that I knew quite well, both now passed away, left the archives pretty much sitting.
However, even with their archives experiencing difficulties, these archivists are keeping a bright outlook of the future.
So overall, I mean, the diocese, the archdiocese, provides me with the support and the resources that I need to do the work that I'm doing. So I feel very positive about the direction that the archives is going right now.
So actually our historical society is in the process now of doing the research of relocating and actually building us a state-of-the-art facility that we can properly give these artifacts and documents the home that they deserve.
We're very fortunate in when they built this building, we had all those issues addressed when we built the space for the archives. In the old building, we were in the Wahlert Memorial Library, and we had the entire archives in one room. And literally, I would have to clear off a corner of a table in order for somebody to sit down and do research. Now we've got this wonderful reading room area out here as well. And we did double our storage space by putting in mobile shelving units as well. So that was a nice feature. So having had the new building now, most of those environmental things were addressed.
You know, I know that's not the correct answer, but most people are always going to say we need more money, we need more resources. I don't really think we do.
Why do they continue to work in the archives in spite of all their troubles? The archivists answer that they are keeping the past and present alive.
We exist primarily to serve the Archbishop and the churches within the Archdiocese. We support them with any kind of information requests that they might have about our history, which then in turn kind of guides future policy.
How can we know who we are if we don't know the past? And then I was thinking about the Hittite civilization in the Middle East, referenced many times in the Old Testament of the Bible. Those people had disappeared for 3,000 years, literally. Nobody knew them, who they were. We don't want to have to wait 3,000 years for people to find out who we were.
This isn't necessarily the biggest archive around. It's not the most expansive, but we have a really good quality of archives. Galena's history goes back well before 1826 when it was incorporated as a city.
I was offered this position and I've kind of fallen into love with the whole aspect of preserving the things of the past so those who come in the future can enjoy them and learn from them. And I think it's important work. I tell people all the time, I guess I have the best job in Dubuque.